All right. Thank you guys all for coming. We're going to give you a high-level overview of Backdrop CMS, which is specifically intended for small to medium-sized businesses, nonprofits, and even higher education, anyone that has a significant concern about the budget of their website.
She just point out that I'm supposed to say this slide. Backdrop. Backdrop is a Drupal fork. And during this presentation, we're going to be going over why we felt a Drupal fork was necessary, some of the philosophical goals of Backdrop, and where we are today. We're going to end with a demo and then go into questions.
So, how many of you have used Squarespace before?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Woo! What about WordPress? Drupal? All right, so in the Drupal world, I feel like a lot of people build Drupal sites because they know Drupal sites. And there isn't often a lot of thought at the beginning of a project as to whether this project should best be built in Drupal or not. I know it's something that I am guilty of, where it's like, oh, I'm already over the Drupal learning curve, so I'm just going to build all of my websites in Drupal from now until forever. And I think that a lot of times clients would be better served by actually doing a really thorough examination of what their needs are, what their budget is, what their internal administration goals are for the site, and seeing if maybe something like WordPress might be better for them or something like Squarespace, and kind of giving them more options, especially the lower budget projects. So we're hoping that Backdrop will just be another one of these projects, one of these tools that you can help consider for those lower end websites. Nate and I are the founding forkers of Backdrop CMS. We thought long and hard about whether we should do this, how to do this, why to do this, and we're hoping to share a lot of that with you today.
So in some of our background, we've got a lot of history in the Drupal community. Both of us started or had a lot of our introduction into Drupal teaching new people how to build Drupal websites, whether that was site building with views and CCK or development using theming. A long time ago, when Lullabot was kind of the only education game in town, I did a lot of on-site trainings, flying to city to teach groups of 40 to 50 new Drupalers at a time. Jen at Chapter 3 became the first director of training, partnered with Aqua to develop the training materials that they then disseminated to all of their partners. And I wrote one of the early Drupal books using Drupal for O'Reilly, or co-authored with several other Lullabots at the time. And we've just been deeply engaged in getting people up to speed with Drupal for a long time, and we've seen how hard it is for people to struggle to kind of come to grips with Drupal concepts and even just PHP concepts, taking those Dreamweaver people or even site administrators, webmaster types, and turning them into Drupal developers and Drupal site builders. Core contributions, we've also been really involved in the past. Drupal 6, I wrote what originally was called the AHA framework. It is now the AJAX framework. The drag and drop table stuff, file and image handling. I wrote both of those modules for Drupal 7, and I'm still the maintainer of those modules. And in Drupal 8, was responsible for creating the new dialogue system that we use that's shared across the platform, and pushing for the CK editor module in Drupal 8.
I'm a newer contributor to Drupal core. It took me a while to realize that there were a lot of things that could still be improved, and that I would be welcome and capable of improving them. My first core patch didn't go in until early in the Drupal 7 cycle, and then I got hooked, and I joined the Drupal core usability team. I was involved in a lot of usability studies here. And then in Drupal 8, I was the accidental Twig initiative lead for about 2 years, where through training I realized that it was too hard to teach people how to build front ends for Drupal, and I felt like we needed to solve that in Drupal 8 by rewriting the whole front end. So we've got a Twig theme system in there and all that in Drupal 8. Though through the course of making those changes, I've obviously not doing that anymore. We're now doing this, and we'll show you a little bit why later. So I've gotten a lot of flack about forking the software versus forking the community, and I just wanted to say that I am much more about the community behind Drupal than I am about the code. Long before I ever wrote my first line of code for Drupal, I organized a camp. I've been running the Bay Area Drupal camp in San Francisco since 2007. I've talked to a lot of people through that process. They're running camps, they're doing trainings, through client meetings and other things. And I feel like I have a pretty good pulse on what the community actually wants. And a lot of times the things that they're complaining about are not things I'm seeing being addressed in Drupal. So I'm trying to do this for the community in spite of what a lot of people may believe. But yeah, that's Nate and I spend a lot of time traveling to places like this, talking to people like you, trying to guess what the next generation wants for websites in the future, and so that's why we're here.
Yeah, I always like to emphasize that the reason why we have all of these intro slides on who we are, and it's like, oh my God, let's get to Backdrop. We really want to say that we're doing this out of love for the Drupal project. We love Drupal. We've been Drupal for 7-10 years of our lives, and we're very passionate about Drupal and the spread of information and building websites, and we love it. It's what we do. And it just so happens that when we look at the future of Drupal and its potential direction, we felt that this is necessary and will really benefit the overall Drupal community of users and site developers in a major way.
So, if all that's true, why would you create a fork? The first thing is obviously the direction the Drupal project is going. Bigger and bigger sites are using Drupal, and it's kind of steering towards the enterprise. We have, the next slide is a quote from Drupal.com, so the marketing engine behind the future of Drupal.
So I think this is not just a particular instance of this. It's a general trend that Drupal is being heavily marketed towards the enterprise. And it's being marketed towards the enterprise because it fulfills enterprise needs. And Drupal 8, more so than ever before, is very enterprise-oriented. It's focused towards the enterprise. And Drupal.com itself says that, it says specifically, widely used enterprise web CMS. So that's what we're calling ourselves, is an enterprise web CMS. And there's numbers to back this up. The number of sites running Drupal, this is Drupal market share by traffic. These are pulled from the site builtwith.com that analyzes what sites are running what software. If you're looking at the top 10,000 sites that are out there, Drupal runs almost 4% of those websites currently. So this is from 2009 to 2014, which was the last time I had a builtwith.com account subscription. If you're the top 10,000 websites, Drupal runs 3.5% of, 100,000 websites, Drupal runs 3.5% of those websites. But if you're the top million or everybody else, the rest of the internet, Drupal only runs little less than 2% of the entire internet, if you just take all sites, generally speaking. And so this is basically just saying, the larger your website is, the more likely it is to be running Drupal. And this gap has been increasing over time as more larger sites start to adopt Drupal, then the gap kind of spreads further that more large sites are running Drupal than percentage-wise of smaller sites. That doesn't mean that there are fewer Drupal sites in the past than there were previously. It's still growing all the way across the chart, but just trending towards the larger side. Direction, and this is looking into the future of what Drupal 8 is. These are the things that Jen and I saw as we were developing during the Drupal 8 cycle. Huge code base. It's more than 3 times the current byte size. A lot more dependencies on external libraries. And a lot of that is the Symfony-based HTTP kernel, and then the proliferation, not just of the Symfony code itself, but the proliferation of Symfony ideals and code throughout Drupal basically resulted in a rewriting of pretty much everything in all of Drupal. Rewriting, which in turn made it all object-oriented, but that's not really something that we're anti or really have a strong opinion about. Procedural, object-oriented, it's all code and it's all adaptable. And a real significant increase in the complexity complexity of all of the systems, and complexity of the coding patterns. Dependency injection, controllers for services, doctrine. These are all more concepts that add to the overall complexity of the software, that you need to know all of these things before you can even do step one. And so it's just a lot of work.
Another thing that we're concerned about is the increasing cost of Drupal. And this is the kind of thing where I think a lot of organizations get a little tricked, where they're like, oh, we're going to switch to this free software platform. But I like to call Drupal free as in pony. And that, like, yeah, you get it for free, but it eats a lot and it needs new shoes all the time. And the vet bills are really expensive. And there's these hidden costs to owning a Drupal site that might not necessarily be apparent from outside. We have specialized expensive hosting. Like, you start with your shared host and then you move a Drupal site onto it, and then you're like, oh wow, my site's really slow. And it's like, oh, your hosting provider, they have Drupal specific hosting providers that are really fast. You should there. It's like, oh, well, that's more expensive. Okay, that's fine. But looking into the future, is everybody going to be able to afford to move to one of those more expensive platforms, or are they going to try and build it themselves, and other costs associated with that? We have expensive developers. Like, trying to hire Drupal developers, it's expensive. There's a high demand for them and a really small amount of people that are available. So that ends up being expensive too. And then the scariest thing to me is the fact that I've got to go back to people who are perfectly happy with their Drupal 6 websites and tell them that this software is end of life, and for security reasons you're going to need to upgrade. And they're like, why? It's fine, just leave it alone. And you're like, well, there's risks associated with it, and then you have to have that conversation. And if you do get them to sign on, they're like, well, how much does it cost? And you're like, well, probably a lot more than you originally spent for your website, just because that's how things work. And so I think, listening to people who are struggling with this problem of their free website not being free, and then looking into the future of what I'm going to have to ask them to pay, it just started to make me really uncomfortable. Like, these are clients I'm trying to do a good job, I'm trying to help, I'm trying to solve their problems, and instead I'm creating problems where they shouldn't really be. So that's something that's concerning to us about the future of Drupal. And another thing that's a little distressing is how decisions in the Drupal community are made or not made in most cases. Nate and I obviously have a lot of experience in there. We've kind of seen how the sausage is made, and a lot of times it's benefited us, but a lot of times it hasn't. And we'd like to kind of create a system that's a little more transparent about that sort of thing. So,
yeah, I like to say, like, how did we get to the point where we are, that we felt a fork was necessary in the first place? Like, couldn't we just keep working on Drupal and contribute to Drupal and make Drupal do what we wanted, or make Drupal be what we wanted it to be? And it's all part of this decision-making process within Drupal. Drupal runs upon this thing called Do-ocracy. Do-ocracy is basically this idea that things happen because people do them, and whatever you do, then that's how it happens, and the more you do, the more you can guide the direction of the project. This is the fundamental principle of Drupal, is that basically if you have a vision and you want to change it, you can change it. And it's true. Every single one of us is empowered to shift the direction of Drupal any way we want, as long as we have enough time and resources to make it happen. That's great. That's really empowering. It's why a lot of us why the community is so large and why we all feel so empowered. But on the other hand, it's really, like, it can go any direction, maybe not that everybody wants, or maybe that only a few people want, but have an enormous amount of time and resources to pull it in that direction. And so we have this issue that basically we couldn't put in enough time to put it into the direction that we wanted it to. And a lot of it behind all that is that there's no guiding principles, there's no philosophy behind Drupal. It says Drupal is this, and we try to fill this need, and that's what we are. Instead, it's Drupal is for everybody, and anybody that has enough resources can pull it in that direction. Wow. Anyway, in Backdrop land, we wanted to structure this in a way that wasn't going to happen again, that it wasn't quite so liberal. And so what we've done is we've formed a group. Our governing model is based on Apache. Apache uses this thing called the PMC, or Project Management Committee. And the Project Management Committee basically is responsible for the philosophy and goals of a project, and defines what those are, and then makes sure or guides the community to try to ensure that they stay focused on the core values of that project. So we're really excited to be doing this. Apache has proven that this is a successful model, not just with the web server, which is what we're all familiar with when we say Apache, but there are dozens of Apache projects that are all run this way. Cassandra, Cordova, Couch, Hadoop, Lucene, Solar, all of these projects are all Apache projects that all fall under this model of being a group of people that evaluates things, makes sure that we follow our principles, reminds people like where we're going with this project, and if needed, if conflict arises between community members, the PMC is there to basically handle resolution.
So before we created this committee that's going to make sure our project sticks to its goals, we needed to sit down and think really hard about what the goals of our project are going to be. And part of it was that, Nate and I were contributing to a project that we thought our goals were aligned with. And then when we sat down and studied, where are Drupal's principles? What are they? It was, first of all, really hard to find. And we did find a page. It was like 5 years out of date. And there was a bunch of stuff that was stated on there. But from us being neck deep in it, realized those weren't really the principles of the project anymore. They might have been 5 years ago. But we weren't making decisions that were in line with those goals. So we're like, okay, well, let's state our own goals. And let's go over what's really different between our goals and Drupal. Our first goal is that backwards compatibility is important. And this is fundamentally different from Drupal's stance on backwards compatibility, that it would slow innovation, and so we aren't going to care about compatibility from version to version. That is something I think has a huge effect on the cost and the learning curve and a lot of other things that are really important to us in terms of the direction of a software project. So we decided to reevaluate that principle of Drupal's and say, maybe backwards compatibility is important, and that's going to be one of our core tenets, so we aren't going to change very much. We're only going to change the things that are most important so that everyone can keep up with everything else. The second principle is about writing code that the majority of people can understand. And there is an important distinction between people and developers. Drupal is trying to write code that developers understand, but we believe that there are more people in the world that have problems that need to be solved by the software we're writing than there are developers. And so we want to make sure that we're adopting coding patterns that apply to the lowest common denominator. Everybody should be able to open a file and figure out what it means, regardless of whether you have a degree in computer science or not. And see problems, because if you can see problems, you can contribute much faster rather than having to need to go learn something first. And I think everybody's opinions are valid. The next one is including features that apply to the majority. This is making sure that we aren't putting things in core that are only going to benefit 1% or less than 1% of people who are actually using the software. That goes for modules. It also goes for, swappable subsystems, right? Things that maybe someone who using the software wouldn't necessarily see, but may have an effect on them anywhere. If there's going to be a performance degradation for most of the people who are using it compared to that 1% of people who get the gain from the swappable system, that shouldn't be in there because that's going to be hurting more people than it's helping. And we want to make sure, just like Drupal has a really great solid API system, we want to retain that, right? That is what makes Drupal what it is today. It's great by itself. It's better with modules. We want to have that same kind of mentality where we're not going to put everything in core for everyone. Those other people need to be able to change the system to make it what they need to. So having a really solid and stable API is really important to us. Meeting low system requirements, we want to make sure people can run this on shared hosting, right? You need to be able to run it on older versions of PHP, on lower system requirements, just places that make it more attainable to more people. And planning and scheduling releases, that's also, when is Drupal 8 out? When it's ready. When is Backdrop out? Well, we'll talk about this later, but we are specifically sticking to having deadlines of when things will be done, and we're going to release on those deadlines. And we're going to measure, okay, this is what's planned in the next release, and we're going to work towards those things. So we're going to have a curated list of things that we think is important, and we're going to get them done. If they aren't done on time, that's fine. We'll ship anyway, and we'll do them in the next release. We'll talk about that more later. And then the last one is obviously being free and open source is really important to us. As a fork of a free open source project, we had to inherit that. But it's also something we really strongly believe in, because we wouldn't be able to do the kinds of things we're doing now if it weren't for open source software and free open source software in particular. So those are our principles.
Yeah, we also formed a mission statement of what we're trying to do just generally, broadly as a goal for ourselves. And that's this is it. Backdrop CMS enables people to build highly customized websites affordably through collaboration and open source software. The key word of all of this, and I think that it's something innovative in our space, is this word, affordably. And we're trying really hard to figure out how can we make building websites more affordable. If we're not lowering the cost of building a website with our CMS, we're not doing anything at all. We should be using something else. And so that is our ultimate goal, is to make building websites less expensive. I mean, as long as you can meet your requirements and you can bring the cost down, then that is our goal. But how can we do that? What are some things that we can do to bring down the cost of building websites? Include out-of-box functionality that people need, more responsibility in core, generally that's what that means, and less in Contrib, so the new versions come out, you can upgrade to the new versions, and the functionality you need is there. Simplify the architecture. If you simplify the architecture, that makes it so that more people can understand it more easily. There's less training required, which means less expensive developers required, which unfortunately means for developers like us, that means our knowledge is less specialized and means that we might not cost as much. But hopefully you're delivering to your client based on your ability, not based on the software that you know. Always provide an upgrade path, and this starts today. You can upgrade from Drupal 7 to Backdrop 1 because upgrading is really important, and that's something that we needed to support right away, is being able to move from Drupal 7 sites that are built today to Backdrop sites easily. And maintain backwards compatibility. This is one of those tenets that folds into the concept of affordability. If you maintain backwards compatibility, it makes it faster to port modules, and it makes it easier for existing developers. It lowers the overall learning curve between version jumps. So all of these things are ways that we're trying really hard to lower the cost of the software overall. And as we know, Drupal 7 even is not a simple system, and so reducing complexity is something that we're going to have to work really hard towards. We've already made some steps in the first version of Backdrop by doing some things that would be considered wildly drastic in the Drupal world, like dropping support for non-MySQL databases. That's a real drastic step for something like Drupal, but 99% of Drupal websites run MySQL databases. And by dropping that requirement, we can reduce the complexity substantially. It means that we don't need to be using a Drupal-specific MySQL abstraction or SQL abstraction layer. Now in Backdrop land, you can feel free to write DB query calls that just go right up against the MySQL server and can do optimized things like optimized queries for pagers, for example, and you don't need to worry about the abstraction layer. Anyway, makes it all easier.
You're probably wanting to know when you can use Backdrop. The answer is right now.
Oh, well, we have this one. Well, Drupal, late 2015, we think.
Drupal 8?
Drupal 8, yeah. You can go to drupalreleasedate.com to get the latest estimate. I'm not sure what it is today. But yeah, Backdrop right now. So we released January 15th, 2015 was the 1.0 release of Backdrop. And 1.1 was actually released a couple months ago.
It still says April, but it was May 15th.
Yeah, it should be a month ago. May 15th, and 1.1 is exciting because we've got a bunch of new stuff in it. Going to talk about modules?
Sure. So we have been just kind of letting the project grow organically in terms of contributed modules. We've got obviously lists of things we want to move into core. But right before DrupalCon Los Angeles, we did an analysis of like, well, let's just look at the top modules that exist for Drupal and see where we stand on those for Backdrop. And it looked really great. We have all of the check marks here you see that are blue. Those are things that have gotten moved into core. All of the ones you see that are green were already existed in Contrib, and the ones that were yellow we were either working on in Contrib or, well, in this case, these are things that are going to be in core in the future. So then we released 1.1 on May 15th, and token and path auto modules got included in core. So we're going to continue moving in that direction in the future, looking at things that are most important to the community and making sure those become core modules rather than remaining in Contrib.
Yeah, and 1.2 is slated for September 15th, and 1.2 we know for a fact is going to include a WYSIWYG editor in the box because it still isn't currently. The way WYSIWYG module is underway is because it's basically in core for Drupal or Backdrop 1.2. In the meantime, CK editor is available in Contrib for Backdrop 1, 1.0 and 1.1.
And we have a bunch of other stuff going into 1.2 too, because
Yeah, our Contrib community is largely based, or is entirely based actually on GitHub right now. You can go to github.com/backdrop-contrib, and we have 130 new or ported, it says modules, but that's actually projects including themes and layouts and modules. We're a small but growing community. There's 38 people that have joined our Backdrop Contrib group and have ported those 138 modules. And we do have actually update status notification now. So as you create new releases on GitHub, we integrate with backdropcms.org, and it runs packaging script and then uploads back to GitHub. And then when you download like the 1.1 version of a module and 1.2 comes out, update status notifications are working and functional just like you would expect with Drupal 7. It's just that the mothership is now backdropcms.org instead of Drupal.org.
And we will have a /modules page on backdropcms.org in the near future.
Very near future. Okay, so demo time. So let's look at actual Backdrop and show you guys where we are. This is exciting, because last year we also gave this talk, but we didn't have anything to show because it wasn't released yet. So demos are much more exciting. So, okay, so first of all, this is a Backdrop site that has Devel and Devel Generate on it, so I generate some content. Right off the bat, you can see our administration tool now is basically admin menu. We renamed it to admin bar, but it's admin menus code. But with some enhancements, things like it's responsive, so as you run out of room, it will collapse down into smaller items. It's also touch and mobile friendly, so if you had an iPad or something like that, you tap to open the menus instead. Just considering the install base of admin menu, we really felt that was like the right decision. More than half of all Drupal websites that are out there, unbelievably, even though Drupal 7 includes a toolbar, they actually uninstall toolbar and install admin menu. That says something, that the toolbar that's in core is not suitable for actual Drupal administration.
And we also like to take things that have proven themselves in Contrib and put them in core rather than designing something entirely new and putting it in core. We like to change less over here. So
yeah, I also like this is functionality that's in the new version of admin menu, but a lot of people don't see or use, is the search functionality. So as you search through, you can find things. What I wanted to point out here is that we'll go over, this is out of box core, that we have views in core. So views is naturally a perfect fit for Drupal 7 or Drupal 8, and so it's in Backdrop 1. And I'm just going to go over adding a view real quick here for demonstration purposes. For recent content, sure, an unformatted list of teasers, great. And so there's nothing new here. Oh, hang on. I got a little bit too excited. Okay, so recent content, and I just want to block. Sure. So there's nothing real new here in the views interface. I guess you guys can see that we have our wrong side.
just drag it. There we go.
So we have a new administration theme in Backdrop.
We don't have a new theme. It just looks different.
Yeah. Well,
Still 7.
Still 7, but it's been updated. It's larger text. It's much more readable, much more modern. Dialogues, like we have built-in native Backdrop dialogues now, so it's not dependent on CTools. Almost every part of CTools is within core now, so that's no longer a necessary project. Having native dialogues, we use those all over the place. So save. That's views. There's really nothing special here within views land. But what I wanted to show you guys, and this is why I constructed the view, is probably this biggest functionality feature differentiator from Drupal 7 or Drupal 8 is that we've revamped the entire blocks UI into layouts. And so layouts, basically, we've decoupled the concept of regions out of themes and into a standalone layout. And what that means from a compatibility perspective is that previously you had a layout.info file that defined the concept of, the theme.info file that specified, the name of the theme and description and stuff like that. But it also had a chunk of regions. And the theme basically only ever had one layout, and it was the regions were defined in the .info file. What we've done in Backdrop is we've separated out the concept of layouts to be a separate .info file, but then you can have as many different layouts as you want on your site. And so in any page on any site, you can say, this page has this layout, this page has this layout, and then you can have separate layouts and separate block structures for any pages on your site.
And your theme becomes a skin, so it doesn't matter what layouts you're using, your site isn't going to break if you change your theme.
Is that all done then in the theme folder level, or are you going to do like...
It's a brand new top-level concept.
Modules, themes, and layouts.
Modules, themes, and layouts. So now you can install new layouts just like you would install new themes. There's a great project in the Backdrop Contrib group for Radix layouts, or Radix. So Radix is a theme in Drupal 7, but in Backdrop land, there's separately the theme, and then there's the layouts. And the Radix layouts includes like 32 Bootstrap layouts that are all based on Bootstrap. But
so Radix is a Bootstrap-based theme, and it also has a component module in Drupal 7 that contains all the layouts. In Backdrop, it's a component layout project that contains all of the layouts. So if you use the Radix theme and the Radix layouts, you can snap them all together however you want. You can also use them independent of each other because the CSS that's necessary for the layouts is in the layouts and the theme is in the theme. So.
Yeah. So out of the box, you start out with two: the default layout and the default administrative layout. So one's used on the front end, one's used on the back end. If you wanted to change the default layout that every page on your site will use, then you can do that here. You can say whether or not you want 1 column, 2 column, or 3, 3, 4 columns. 3, 3, 4 is like historical. That's what used to be the Bartik layout, basically. But you can rearrange all of the contents for the default layout. Like I'm just going to move the powered by block over here, and then add like the syndicate block down at the bottom. Sure. And that would be the default layout that you see everywhere on the front end of the site. So there you go. Now powered by is on the right hand side, and the RSS feed is down here at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layout just for like something like a landing page. This is super common. Let's say you want to make a front page layout, and the front page layout has some crazy complex layout that is different from every single other page on the site, right? So then I can just say this is going to live at front. Conditions are really super cool, but I'll get to that in the next layout. So this, I've now just created a new path at /front page. You can override any existing path if you want, or you can just make up any new path that you want in the whole system. Add a block. I'm going to add that recent content view that I just created. I'm going to add something like syndicate.
So something you guys might not have noticed that's different here is that go ahead and finish adding this. On the top, there's a block called header, right? That used to be in your theme. So there's like some structural differences in the way the pages are set up, that your layout is your entire page. So your header and your footer are in your layout. When you create a new one, it just copies all of that over. So you get your header and your footer in each new layout that you build.
Yeah, so if you want to build like a marketing page that has no header, you just remove the header blocks, and then you can have a page that is just content, just a landing page that has nothing at all. The page template now is literally nothing except for head tag, body tag, and then it's like print. It's one variable because the middle of the page is all basically controlled by layouts now. So yeah, things that used to be theme settings, there's no longer global theme settings anymore. It's just like it's all just folded into these header blocks. If you want to display the logo, site name, or slogan, then you configure that per block rather than being in the theme, which is always kind of a bananas location. It's also really cool some of the things you can do with these blocks. We've got style settings inside of here, and if you just use the default style, then that's like analogous to the block tpl.php file that we all know and love. But if you change the style to dynamic, then that basically turns into something like what's it called, fences module, or views, where you can now change every single tag within that block, because it makes a lot of sense sometimes for a block that's in the sidebar to be in a side rather than a div, but sometimes it's a section and sometimes it's nothing, and so you can choose the wrappers, add classes, the heading levels, and then the content itself, what that thing is, and modify each and every one of those things. Just like any other thing or block in Drupal 7, you can also add conditions to say, only show this block if the language is this is an English-only website, but only show this block if the site is being displayed in Spanish. So really helpful for multilingual functionality. You can conditionally hide and show blocks or entire layouts based on conditions.
And that's the same conditional system that works on the per layout. So selecting a layout or selecting to show a block in an existing layout. It's the same.
So this is my new page that I just created, custom layout, and you can do whatever you want with it. Can create as many layouts as you want on as many pages as you want. Besides creating new pages, you can also take any page on the existing site. So right now we're using the 2-column layout by default. I'm going to use the flipped layout, and I'm going to override the node/% path. And so what this will do, you can see this context area automatically appeared and identified the fact that that was a node-based context. If you wanted to override things like a user, it would identify that too and say that's a user-based context. Or if you want to make up some crazy path like this, where you have multiple contexts, but Backdrop has no idea what that path is or that other context is, then it will just ask you, what is that other context? Would you tell me? And if you tell it what that context is, then when you're adding conditions, let's say you want to add a condition based on permission, you can add a condition based on either the current user that's logged in or the user whose user ID was defined as the 4th argument, right? And so it makes it so you can set up wildly complex conditionals and systems based on multiple nodes, multiple different kinds of contexts that come in.
Is anyone in here a panels user?
Yeah.
So all we did was port panels module to Backdrop, throw out the user interface, and write something new.
Well,
Because-
it's not hidden anymore.
Right. I mean,
It shows up for you. It tells you what you just
And
did.
Page Manager is seamless. It doesn't. You don't even notice it. Page Manager is basically in core, but it's a single hook now instead of an entire subsystem and module. So anyway, so we're just going to take the example of overwriting an existing path here, and then we're going to say specifically do this for a particular node type. And so we're going to override this for articles, but basic pages will fall back to the default layout, is what will happen here. So I'm going to add this layout. It's going to have a 2-column flipped layout. And then over here in the sidebar, so it automatically ported those blocks, but let's say in this version I want the powered by block down here and the syndicate block. Come on, Jake, where do you want it? There you go. And put that up there. And now specifically for articles, so this is the default layout, not the front page. It's got the content over here on the right-hand sidebar, or I'm sorry, the powered by block on the right-hand sidebar. But then on article content specifically, it uses the flipped layout where it's on the opposite side and the powered by blocks down at the bottom. So very cool. Essentially, yeah, if you wanted to summarize it all in one sentence, panels in core. Just much better panels.
You're able to define the article type of a node.
The article type was purely just because I've got 2 content types, one called page and one called article. Yeah, so all content types are automatically.
It helps you fill that in.
Yeah,
So the site is like default out of the box. The profile includes 2 content types, page and article. And when he was defining this particular layout, he added a condition that said node is type article.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll just list all of the types you have there, and you can choose.
Yep, and so you can also, of course, if you can conditionally make certain layouts, then you can also do the same path a second time. So like a page layout, for example. And let's say it wants to be a 1-column, I would do node/% a second time. And then I would add a condition saying, you could actually leave off the condition if you wanted to, and this is for basic pages. And so now there's 2 layouts at the same path, and whichever one matches conditions first, then it will use that layout.
Is there a place to sort them?
Yep. Yeah, right here. If there's multiple ones on the same path, then you can reorder what the priority, and then the first one that matches wins.
So it's just like panels variants, only rather than having variants, we just said they're all layouts within the same list.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of magic going on here. Things like there's reorder if there's multiple layouts at the same path, for example. But there's no menu settings on node/% because you're overriding an existing menu item. But there is a menu settings for front page because front page didn't exist before you created it. So, yeah, fancy pants. The way this is all getting stored, this is the next major concept in why you would want to use Backdrop, is because Backdrop includes all of not all, but all of the central functionality of CMI, the Configuration Management Initiative. Every configuration, node type, layout, menu type that you set up, all of that stuff is being saved into flat files in Backdrop land. So if I go down here to layout and I look at this article layout that I've constructed,
that was the first time the timing was so bad. Anyway,
what it's done is it's saved into a JSON file. So in Backdrop land, all configuration is always stored into JSON configuration files. So this is that layout that I just set up for articles, and you can see this is the path and the label. These are the blocks that I've added, and these are all UUIDs of the blocks. And then if I scroll down far enough, you can see these are the blocks themselves matching up to UUIDs. And what that block actually is, this is the login block. And this makes it so that because the block settings are saved per layout, you can have the same block as many times as you want within a single layout, and you can have different blocks, or the same block on as many layouts across different pages in different positions, because they're all per layout configuration.
They can be commits.
Yes. So the really exciting thing about all configuration management, both in Drupal 8 and in Backdrop land, is that you can store all of your configuration as code. And when you deploy it, you can move it across servers using Git. It does need to be moved into a staging directory on the server that you're moving it to, so that you can do an import, and the import manages any synchronization between the configuration and the database. Like if you create a new field, it has to create a new database table. So it's not quite just so easy as git pull. You have to like git pull and then synchronize the configuration. Okay, which is exactly what we're going to do, because that is something that we need to demo. So if I go over here to, if you want to try Backdrop out.
Wait, just a second. Okay,
if you want to try Backdrop out, you can go to backdropcms.org. You can download Backdrop onto your local host, of course, but you can also set up a demo on Pantheon. So Pantheon lets you spin up Backdrop sites just like you would a Drupal or a WordPress site. And then you click that button from backdropcms.org, enter the name of your site, and then hit Create Site. But Pantheon takes a little while to spin up, so I've already done that step and I'm ready here with a visit your site as though I just spun up a new demo. So maybe being dependent upon internet isn't a great idea. Okay, so anyway, here we go, right through the installer.
Looks familiar.
Yeah, very familiar.
Different color progress bar. Otherwise looks familiar.
Yeah, it looks a lot greener. Projected, oh, that's nice. Okay. Okay, yay! Brand new Backdrop site.
Installed nice and fast, didn't it?
Fresh and out of the box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to my development site that I've set up all of these layouts on, front, node /% and the default layouts. And I'm going to go over here to the configuration management section, and I'm going to do a full site export. You could do this with Git and just by checking in those files from the Active Directory. And what we like to do is we use this structure that Greg Dunlap envisioned called the Figure 8 Configuration Management System, where you pipe the staging directory from one server into the active directory on the other, and then the other way around, active into the staging in both directions. And then it makes it so that when you commit from the live server, when you pull down onto your local, it pulls into the staging directory. And likewise, if you commit from the active directory on your development server, when you git pull on the server, it pulls into the staging directory. And then you git pull, and then you're ready to do the staging import.
So you just do that by changing the names of the directories. Instead of using active and staging, you call one dev active and one called live active. And then that way they're both active, but on different sites they work oppositely. And this is written up. We have yes. So there's an issue on GitHub where we've documented there's 3 different ways to manage it. That's our favorite, but there are 2 others in there that you can read. If you grab the latest version of Drupal Watchdog, we've got a 7-page feature article in there where we specifically talk about CMI and how you can manage your code in Git. And there's also a subreddit. We have a Reddit at reddit.com/r/backdrop where people have talked about it too. So we've got it documented.
And it's in the Drupal Watchdog article.
I already said that.
Oh, sorry. I was focused. Okay, so this is the Pantheon site, and you could have used Git to do this instead, but I'm going to export it as a tarball and then import it back up. So I hit stage import, and this import then pulls in. And so it gets it ready so you can see all of the differences before you do something really drastically dangerous to your site. And you can see that I've created these different layouts, the article for the layout, or for the article, for the page, for the front page, and I've modified the default layout.
It's a lot more exciting when the projector's working. I don't know, maybe this adds suspense. Maybe this makes it more exciting. What does it do?
So, so you can see here for layouts that are new, it's just going to, show you everything. That this is a brand new file, and you can browse every individual line. But for something like this, it's actually much more useful if you can see individual things, like the site name on Pantheon is different than the site name from my local host, for example, and my site email was different between these two, and it's going to sync up all of those changes that were different between the two environments. Okay, so those are the new layouts that are all coming in, the configuration changes. You hit import. This actually does the synchronization. If they needed to create content types and fields and things like that, it would do that and update the database likewise. And then I go over here to layouts, and you can see, ta-da, there are all the layouts that I just configured. Yeah, it's all very neat. So that's pretty much it. For demo-wise, at least. You can get involved. We have a public Google Hangout every single Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. We do sprints every Thursday. We have an IRC channel on Freenode, pound Backdrop. Backdropcms.org is where you can learn more information on the philosophy, everything that we covered in this presentation, and start up a demo. And we're on github.com/backdrop. And then there's the Backdrop repository itself. And follow us on Twitter. Questions? Do we have time? What time does this end?
Yeah, we've got 10-ish minutes.
Okay, over here.
Have you done, or has anyone done performance comparison of Backdrop with Drupal?
Yes. It's been done several times, but...
wait, what do you mean by Drupal?
To Drupal 7 and Drupal 8.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah,
So
let's compare
Drupal
7.
7.
So,
that's easy.
Performance-wise, it's just moderately faster, and that's largely because we've removed stuff from Drupal 7. It's actually been kind of nice, though, that we've been able to add stuff. We did extensive benchmarking when we did layouts, and there was no performance regression at all adding layouts, which is a major enhancement in functionality without a performance regression. Views, on the other hand, our front page right now isn't a view, largely just because the front page is super simple, and making the front page a view makes it like 4 times slower. And so maybe in the future, but views itself, like compared Backdrop, or most Drupal sites run with views anyway, but Drupal 7 with views and Backdrop 7 with views, Backdrop wins out just by a marginal amount. But if you compare Drupal 7 front page to Backdrop front page with a view, actually the administration listings are much more realistic than Backdrop slower because it's a view. So, but generally moderately faster.
It feels faster.
Oh, the front end is we've had some front end things that are actually much faster. Our admin menu is crazy faster compared to the admin menu that's in Drupal 7 Contrib.
There's like a psychological thing where you're like, it's so fast, but it's probably just because it looks faster and it feels faster, but not actually, like when you measure it, it's not significantly
Well, it's nice that you don't need to install a ridiculous amount of cruft right out of the box that
Just to
immediately
get it
slows
to-
down
yeah.
your site.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it's a little faster than 7, and we're not comparing it to 8. Yeah, because 8's not
until
done.
8 comes out.
On your
Yeah.
speed test, what kind of speed time? Millisecond time?
It's
couldn't
going to
pull that
vary
off the
so
top of
much
my
by
head.
every site, too. I don't think that would be a fair thing to do.
Yeah. Over here?
Yeah, so you're talking about some of the more popular Contrib modules that you're putting in core or just porting over as Contrib to Backdrop. What happens to the maintainers of those?
So this is one of the big concerns is forking core means that every Contrib project has to fork too. And originally, we have sites we wanted to build in Backdrop, like backdropcms.org, right? And it needs modules. And so our general process is to go to the Drupal site and in the Drupal issue queue very politely say, hey, I'm going to use this module on a Backdrop project and I'm going to put it over here. You, as the official maintainer in Drupal land, are you interested in working on it? If you're not interested in working on it, do you want to, would you be willing to help? If you are interested in working on it, do you want to do it? Just trying to find a way to very politely, not steal so much as notify of what's going on. And initially I was really worried that the Drupal contributed maintainers would be really upset by it, but overwhelmingly they've been really supportive. They've been like, oh, I don't have time to work on it myself, but do whatever you want, and if you need any help, like, let me know. I'm, here, I'll make you a maintainer so you can have access to whatever, and we can collaborate. And so far it's been really positive. So I've been overwhelmingly surprised by the positive reactions from current maintainers. And I think part of that is like there's already been kind of a split with Drupal 7 projects where you have one person who's in charge of working on the Drupal 8 version and one person that's in charge of working on the Drupal 7 version already. So there's already kind of that splitting of who's working on the code. And so now when we're like, oh, we're going to work over here on Backdrop, usually the Drupal 7 people are right on board with that. They're like, no problem, we can collaborate and maintain one module for both, or however. So it's been good so far.
Yeah.
Projecting out 2 years from now, like, what do you, like, honestly, do you fear, like, fall off in enthusiasm, or especially when you're talking about backwards compatibility?
Yeah, I mean, so eventually the reason this is a fork is because the two projects are going to go in completely different directions. And at that point in time, right, when Drupal 7 is no longer relevant, like, we don't need to maintain compatibility with those modules anyway, because the two projects are going to be so different it won't matter. So I would say, like, right now, like, our intended audience are all of the people who are on Drupal 7, and so we're trying to make it as easy as possible to maintain modules between the two, to collaborate with people. But once people start moving to Drupal 8, those people aren't going to be interested in Backdrop for the most part, and we're going to be going in one direction, they're going to be going in another. And so it's like, okay, well, we'll collaborate where we can. We're obviously working with a Drupal security team to, like, synchronize releases at the same time. That will continue. We're still working in the same problem space. We obviously have a really big shared history, but it's going to be less important that maintainers work together if the code is not the same. Like, you can't apply the same fix to both sets of code anymore because they're so different. So,
And one last question. So for, like, small single-use modules, like, what's the porting process? Could an ambitious site builder who knows PHP
yeah,
pull it off?
that's the point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually, I pulled up this documentation while I know it's hard to read on a projector.
Can you make the font
You
smaller?
did a video too.
Smaller. Yeah, there's a video. Video right here. And actually, David Rothstein, the Drupal 7 core committer, actually wrote an excellent series of articles on the Tag 1 website about his experience porting modules to Backdrop. And he did a nice 3-part series.
And how to co-maintain between Drupal 7 and Backdrop.
Yeah, and so we have this section on communication, say that you're going to be porting somebody's modules, but if it's just a one-off and it's yours, then there's a pretty simple set of steps. You need to, first of all, modify the .info file to say that it's compatible with Backdrop. That's pretty much step number 1. But actually, there's some modules that's the only step. Even though the code bases are pretty different because we're not called Drupal anymore, we're called Backdrop, and there's a lot of functions that have the name Drupal in them. But we have a wrapper that you can turn off in settings.php if you want, but it's on by default, that wraps every single one of those functions to call the Backdrop equivalents. And it actually works not just for functions, but it also works for library names if you use Drupal or Backdrop add library, and it also works on JavaScript on the front end. So all of the Drupal functions, the Drupal.t and stuff like that, are all wrapped.
That's our Drupal compatibility layer.
Yeah.
And so we've tried to make it as easy as possible for somebody to drop in a Drupal module. That does not guarantee every Drupal module you'll be able to drop in. But the idea is you should be able to drop it in and turn it on and at least recognize the things that need to be changed really quickly. And hopefully it'll take a day to port a module rather than a week or a month or whatever it might be if you had to write any new code. So the goal is to make it as easy as possible to get it working. And then, of course, there's going to be a significant difference if your module was saving its variables in the variables table instead of in a config file. Like, if you want to leverage the benefits of Backdrop, there is going to be some more work to say, do a config get and config set instead of variable get and variable set. But you can work through that. I mean, they're not huge changes, right? The whole point is to keep it really similar. So we've got, just change names of these functions and hopefully you can get it going. So yeah, an hour or two. I mean, Nate's module was an hour for how to port external links module from Drupal 7.
Oh yeah, I do the entire porting in one video, and you can watch the whole thing from start to finish.
Yeah.
And it's 45 minutes, and that's with explanations and everything. So yeah, simple modules that last like a couple hours. And for a more complex module, I mean, we've got modules like web form and rules that have been ported, and those were like, a couple weeks. So definitely, totally doable. And that's the entire point, is that you should be able to take all of that investment that you have in your current website and move it forward to a more modern system that has all the has a lot of the features that you would expect from a modern system without rewriting everything. And that's what we're trying to provide.
So Backdrop 2 comes out in September 15th, and it will have...
1.2.
Sorry, Backdrop 1.2 will come out September 15th, and it'll have a rich text editor and core. We're putting in more field modules like link, email, date, and we're going to continue to do regular releases every 4 months. So after Backdrop 1.2 will come 1.3, and we've got a roadmap on the website of what's coming in the future, and we're going to keep releasing on time. So if you want to say, I'm not going to upgrade until rich text and core, okay, well, September 16th might be the date for you. So definitely keep that in mind.
Yeah. There's another question.
Just to comment that I love this. This looks great. Never used it or seen anything about this, but definitely love the features, philosophy, and also just wanted to comment that I worked on a previous project not too long ago where just the layouts and how to configure code and being able to push layouts would have saved me countless 60-70 hours worth of work. I had to create all these content types just to get the right layout.
Yeah.
And to structure the data in different ways and have the user be able to input it and output it on the screen in different ways. It requires these extraneous things that I wouldn't have had to do with this layout thing.
Yeah, I mean, we basically looked at what are the biggest problems that Drupal 7 is facing today, and let's fix those first. Because we didn't want to change very much, but we wanted to change the things that we thought were most important. So that's why we started with CMI, because it's a feature everybody has to have now, and layouts, because that's a huge pain point in Drupal development today. So.
Yeah, and really, if we've succeeded, and I don't think we actually have yet, but if we've succeeded, it should be the cost to benefit analysis of upgrading your Drupal 7 site to Backdrop should be clearly in Backdrop's favor, that you're going to save money by upgrading your site to Backdrop because you won't have to ever futz with features ever again, And it's like that should be a trade-off that you can look at the math and say, I'm spending 1/3 of my development time, or maybe 1/4 of my development time managing features, which is about how much time I spend, I feel like, futzing around with that stupid thing. And I gotta say,
it's the best tool we have.
If I didn't have to spend 25% of my time, but I could upgrade a site to Backdrop within a month or two, that would probably end up being in my favor in the long run. And that's what we're trying to do.
So we've got, I think, a little while before we're going to get there, and what that's going to be is making sure we've got enough Contrib modules so that when somebody goes to upgrade from 7 to Backdrop, the majority of what they need is already there. And I think that we have until that person has to make that same decision about Drupal 8 to actually get to that goal. Like, you, as the owner of a Drupal 7 site, will say, okay, I need to go somewhere. Let's compare Drupal 8 to Backdrop. And when we have a fair comparison on, okay, we've got an equivalent number of modules ready or whatever, that I think is the point in time where we better be ready. But we're not quite there yet. We've got a few more months at least. So I think we can get there. And we've got a bunch of people working hard on it. So we don't have an upgrade path from 6 to Backdrop, but whatever you would normally do from 6 to 7, you can do that, and then you can go from 7 to Backdrop. And I also believe that somebody is going to eventually port migrate module to Backdrop because it's so similar to 7. Why not?
I mean, every project, anything Drupal 7 has, given a small amount of effort, can be a Backdrop module.
So that way you can have a migrate-based upgrade.
Yep. Exactly.
And similarly, if you guys adopt Backdrop and then decide in the future that that's not what you want and you want to go to Drupal 8, the path off of Backdrop is also the same as the path off of 7 because both of them will require using migrate.
Have in place.
Right.
Yeah, because in Drupal 7, or Backdrop's data structure, it's slightly different, but it's so similar to Drupal 7 that the migration path from Backdrop to Drupal 8 will be almost identical as a Drupal 7 site to Drupal 8. So if it turned out it was a terrible mistake, you won't
hope that will never
you won't
happen.
be in a terrible position anyway.
Low risk, high reward.
We're pretty much all
So
out
one
of
more
time.
question? I've got one more minute.
Okay.
Was there a question? No. Yes? No? Okay, I'm imagining things.
Is there any sites running live now?
Backdropcms.org, running Backdrop.
Yeah,
We also have we also have
Go on to pay bills.
so we have a bunch of contributed module and theme and layout maintainers who we assume are working on websites. We just don't have any way to collect that information from them yet as to what they're working on. But we do have on our roadmap building a showcase site onto backdropcms.org, so people who are working websites will be able to post them and we'll see it. I have a couple of clients that are now, I mean, my dad's site runs Backdrop, but I don't really count that. But I do have paying clients now that are upgrading to Backdrop. So that list will start growing here in the
And we do know there are a couple hundred Pantheon sites, and a couple of them have actually switched to paying accounts and launched those sites. And we also have update status checking. If you've turned on the ability to check for updates, that also pings the mothership and says you're running this version of Backdrop, and then we log that. We haven't publicly started showing that information, and unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, by design, we don't know what websites those are. It's anonymous. So we know how many there are, but we don't know if
We
they're
don't know what
production
they are.
or not, or just somebody's blog or whatever. But we don't have any big names yet because we've only been out for 4 or 5 months. But they're coming. I know Jen landed her first paying client. Lullabot is actively looking and evaluating projects against Backdrop. And so I think that we'll probably see some pretty good sites up here in the near future. Okay. Well, thank you guys all very much for coming.